Welcome back, bow hunters. This is Ron with Stay Sharp Guide. In today's video we're going to be looking at sharpening the new tooth of the arrow single bevel head. In full disclosure, we are in the midst of building our new headquarters for Stay Sharp. This is what it looks like today. And my wife is in the house making 1,000,000 quarts of tomato sauce, so I'm struggling to find a place to make a video. So I am on location in my garage, so you're going to hear all sorts of background noise. I apologize for that, but I'll get set up and we'll be right back to talk about sharpening this tooth of the arrow single bevel. I also want to make it clear that this head has been shot into a target many times, so even though it is not new, we'll still look at it under the microscope and just get a baseline in the sharpness tester. Your heads will differ from mine in that yours will be new, but the point is, eventually every broadhead is going to be a used broadhead. You will send this through some animal, hopefully into the dirt, and then you will be forced to sharpen it. So don't worry about the status of it in this video. Let's just talk about the sharpening. But first, as always, we'll look at it under the microscope and in the sharpness tester. The next step that people seem to be very interested in is how much weight is lost due to sharpening. So let's weigh it beforehand. 126 is the pre-sharpening weight. Now you've seen the bevel side under the microscope, and it was simply a placeholder just so we can get a before, what it looks like before sharpening, and we'll look at it again after sharpening. But now let's look at it in the sharpness tester to see what sort of a baseline we're starting with. Again, this has been shot, but we need some place to start, so let's see what we got. So that's not bad. That's not terrible. But certainly we can fix that. And that's what we're going to talk about next, the method of sharpening this, because this is a single bevel that is honed to 45 degrees, and I believe that to be one of the steepest single bevels out there. So we will talk about how to get this really sharp next. The reason we're making this video is because there's been a lot of demand, phone calls, emails. Do you have a sharpener that goes to 45 degrees for this new single bevel by tooth of the arrow? And when the calls started coming in, the answer was no. Nobody makes a 45 degree sharpener. I don't know if any of our competitors do. We didn't. But we got enough requests that we decided to take our existing C guide, which the existing one, and I'm going to show a picture of the existing one and the new one here. The original C had 5 positions going to 40 degrees. We have added a 6th position to get you to 45 degrees. So now if we look at, lay the dowel on here and lay it on the edge, dowel edge, we are right at 45 degrees. And being that the blade is so small, this 1/2 inch dowel covers much of the blade all at once. With the C kit, and I would recommend, highly recommend the C kit. I know we sell a C guide where you just get the guide. The C kit comes with a square dowel, a round dowel. It comes with a really nice double cut round file if you really messed up your head. And it comes with 5 sheets of our silicone carbide paper. And it's that silicone carbide paper that you're going to wrap around either the round or the square dowel. In this case, you would definitely want to use the square dowel, since this is neither convex nor concave. It's a straight edge. And what I do is I start out by pre-cutting my sandpaper in 1-inch strips. So we'll provide you full sheets. Cut it in 1-inch wide strips, pre-form it around the wooden dowel, and then you'll hold it in place with just tape. This way you can take that dowel and turn it into 5 different grits: 400, 800, 1200, 2500. I'll start with 240. But those 5 grits would be the coarseness in which you'll be sharpening the head. So I'll get this set up and then we'll start sharpening it. Alright, I've got 240 taped to the square dowel. This is the positioning for the head. You want this edge parallel to this roller. So if I tip it, you're going to see those two are parallel with one another. Now you could slide this up, but you'd lose the ability to grab the blade. You could slide it down, but then you get too close to the edge. But this is where you want it, and you want it to be parallel with the roller. You will place the stick on the rolling surface. Again, that's a roller, it rolls. You'll place it on the blade, and I would recommend, certainly with 240, that you start with just a pulling stroke. And one thing you're going to notice right away is that these are hollow ground. And if I can get close enough to see, so that was sharpened with a round wheel device. So it's concave. So I'm hitting out on this edge and back on the heel. Through the process of sharpening, we're going to clean up this whole edge, but just know that you're going to see those 2 silver lines. I'm hitting the high spots because this is hollow ground. And you can see the round shape to that. But just know that we're going to be flattening that. So I'm going to go through 240 grit, and when I get a burr, and we're going to talk about the importance of the burr and then getting rid of the burr after I go through this sharpening step. So I typically speed up my videos so they're not so crazy long, and that's what I'll do here. Alright, so that was a greatly condensed 3.5 minutes. Now let's see if we can get rid of this glare. And you can see I've gotten rid of that hollow ground, except in a little spot back there. You can see right there. But through the rest of the grits, I will get rid of that. It's not important to get rid of it, but I just wanted to make you aware of it when you're sharpening it. You're going to see it. What I wanted to do is check for the burr. So here again, I'm going to use a piece of Post-it note, printer paper, something nice and thin and flexible, but what's important is that its width not be more than that of a pencil, 1/4 inch. If you try to detect the burr over the entire edge, it's going to be kind of tough. So let's see if we can pick up a burr at all on this. Yeah, so we're hooking. The paper is hitting that burr and flexing. So we've created a burr. We've rolled a burr over onto the flat side. Once a burr is created, it has to get broken off. Now, for a single bevel, you would lay the head flat. So I can literally trap this flat on here, but I need to be able to stroke it. So I think what might be easiest for you, you can either try to lay it flat this way and stroke it, or if you want to be a little bit more visual, you would be trapping it flat and then just move the dowel. Your goal is to break off the burr. There should be no burr when you're done. Also, do not tip it up. Do not create a bevel on the back side. If you see somebody creating a micro bevel on the back side just to break off the burr, that's a lazy cheat, and now you've turned a single bevel into a double bevel. A single bevel is like a chisel. You want it to be flat on one side, bevel on the other side for maximum sharpness. If you're putting a micro bevel on the back side because you struggle to get rid of the burr, you're cheating the process and you're not going to get it as sharp. Alright, so I believe I have now gotten rid of the burr, and as we go through this, you're going to notice you're going to get rid of that coating. I think they've used a black anodized finish on here, and that will be gone by the time you're done. So now we have 240 completed, created a burr, broke off a burr with 240. We're going to remove this 240 and we're going to replace it with 400, so I'll do that next. 400 grit on the dowel. The process is exactly the same. Now I'm using very light pressure and going forward and backward. The 240 grit can sometimes catch on the blade. You may even tear the paper. If that happens, you're pushing way too hard. You want to lightly float over this edge. There is no need to apply any great amount of pressure. A lot of pressure not only risks cutting the paper, but you just strip the granules off of the silicone carbide paper. If you push hard, you're not going to remove any more material by pushing hard. All you're going to do is destroy that silicone carbide paper much faster. So again, light pressure. Also, the first grit that you achieve is your foundation for success. Your 240 burr, I should have said your first burr is your foundation for success. Your first burr, in this case 240, will establish your success. If you don't get a burr at 240, don't expect to get it sharp at 400 and all the other grits. It's 240 is where you start. So get that initial burr and you will enjoy a faster sharpening and much greater success. And because we got a burr at 240, it would take very little time to do one at 400. Now, 240, I had a burr in about 3.5 minutes that I sped up. In the short time that I've been talking here at 400, let's see if we've got a burr already. Have we gotten rid of that hollow ground? See that little spot? It'll eventually go away. Again, not that it's important, but just so you're aware of it. Let's see if we've got a 400 grit burr yet. I can feel a little pop, but we're not there yet. So I'm going to keep going at 400 grit. If you don't have a burr, keep going. Don't think, oh, it's a matter of stroke count. It's a matter of minutes. The only unit of measure you care about is, did you get a burr? Also, don't just wear out one piece or one side. Turn your dowel around and you'll have fresh 400 grit. And you see how it got a little louder. We're on fresh granules here. Alright, that was an additional minute of sharpening. Everybody seems to care about time, so I'm adding it in this video. Yep, we're getting it to hook, but I would like a little bit better burr, so I'm going to give it a little bit more. Alright, let's get some focus here. Come on. And this is what our edge is looking like now after another minute. Yep. You can hear the popping. So now that we've got a 400 grit burr, we have to break it off. Again, lay it flat, and you can move the dowel or you can move the head, your choice. Do not tip the head into the paper. Do not create a double bevel. And this burr, as you saw with the paper, how small it is. It takes very little to break it off. It takes almost no pressure at all. Trap it flat. Give it a stroke. Trap it flat. Nice light stroke. And again, you will be polishing up the back side. And so now already at 400 grit, this is getting nice and sharp. So now I'm going to switch to 800 and we'll be back. Now we've added 800 grit to the dowel. Process is the same. Super light pressure, back and forth over the surface of the blade. Go as fast or as slow as you're comfortable with. If you push hard, you wreck the silicone carbide paper. So I'm going to go through this, but I'll speed it up and then we'll come back for checking the burr. Okay, we did about 2 minutes on that at 800 grit. Let's check. So we have an 800 grit burr that we catch on. You can see the paper flex as it stops and then it pops off. That's your signal that you can stop and then break the burr off. In this case, laying it flat, light pressure, and you'll see I'm building up some residue here. You should expect to see that when you're breaking off the burr. That's the debris coming off the silicone carbide paper. That's the burr coming back to this side. So a single bevel head, while your focus is the bevel side, you must sharpen the flat side. So you are paying attention to both sides in the burr breaking process. And as stated, we're starting to really polish up that back side, the flat side. And we are getting it sharp. And you're seeing it's not taking very long. We're using very little time at each grit, a couple minutes. Now this head hasn't hit a rock. It hasn't been damaged, dinged, nicked. So we can fly it through it pretty quickly here. Now we're going to put on 1200 grit. I just keep using the same tape. Tape it to the dowel. Try to get it as tight as you can. You don't want to arc here. You don't want to pucker a separation between the silicone carbide paper and the wooden dowel. So stretch it tight while you're doing it. Ordinarily, I don't show all of these details in my video for expedience sake, but I'm getting a lot of comments from people saying, well, you sharpened that head in 5 minutes. Well, no, that's how long the video was, 5 minutes. I just edited a bunch of stuff out to make them shorter. But all right, so now we've loaded the dowel, same dowel, now with 1200 grit. Same process. You can go forward or backward or both, whichever you're comfortable with. But again, light pressure. So now I'm going to go through 1200 grit, and then we'll come back and check for a burr. Alright, let's check that. I can do a little bit better, so I'll spend a little bit more time on it. So the only thing smaller than a 1200 grit burr is a 2000 grit burr. As you go up, they're incredibly hard to feel. I can still feel it running through the grooves of my fingerprint, and that's a skill set you should learn. But we've got our burr, and you can see what the silicone carbide paper is starting to look like. So now let's break our burr off. Again, trap it flat and stroke it forward or backward or both, whichever is the most controllable to you. And you can see, look at the paper, what we're doing is we're getting rid of that black oxide coating. Trap it flat. We'll go to a fresher piece here. You should see, you can see the paper discoloring. Trap it flat. So the finish that we're producing on the bevel side is the same finish we're producing on the flat side. You cannot ignore the flat side. And now you'll see what's building up there. We've pushed some of the burr to this side, but we're also getting the residue. And that's what we're looking like now. Here's what we look like on the back side. Again, if I was only getting shiny out here on the edge but leaving the black oxide here, that means I'm putting a bevel on the back side. Don't do that. This blade is not that big. This dowel is only a 1/2 inch wide. The entire blade fits on there. You'll have no problem resting it on there, but the entire back side of the blade will get burnished or polished due to this act, and that is a must if you want to keep it super sharp. Oh man, that's 1200 grit and we're doing well. Alright, I'll be back. I'm going to put 2500 grit on and we'll wrap this up finally at the end with some buffing compound. You can see the edge we're already getting, and that's only at 1200. Now I've got 2500 grit loaded on the stick. Now we ship this square dowel, and it's about 10 or 11 inches long. If you go to a hardware store or a Home Depot or a Lowe's and you buy a 1/2 inch dowel, it'll come 3 or 4 feet long. cut a bunch of pieces, and then you can pre-tape all of your pieces of each grit, and then you'll have a 240 stick, a 400 stick, a 8, a 12, a 2500, rather than constantly stopping to re-tape using the single stick that we give you. So you can speed up the process and automate it. Just go get yourself a 1/2 inch dowel, cut it into a bunch of pieces 11 or 12 inches long. So the burr at 2500 grit is incredibly small. It's hard to see, hard to feel. So I get the question, why so many grits? You know, why can't you just get it sharp with 2 grits? The success starts at 240 mantra is real. That's the fastest material removal grit. Fastest to get a burr grit. So start there. But 240 isn't going to be sharp enough to hunt with. You need to use 400 grit to get rid of the scratches in the metal. And when we look under the microscope, you can see the scratches in the metal. We need 240 to get rid of the scratches that, we need 400 to get rid of the scratches that 240 created. 800 removes the scratches of 400. 1200 removes the scratches of 800. Here I'm on 2500, removing the scratches from 1200. Those scratches under a microscope look like mountain ranges. The edge of the blade, it's, you know, increasingly less jagged as you go. I'm going to link in the description below a video I did where I show each grit under a microscope, what 244, 812, and 2500 looks like under a microscope. So it's a video called, you know, what can you expect from sharpness at each grit, and then you'll get an appreciation. But each of these grits makes the blade progressively smoother and sharper, reduces that jaggedness. And as you can already see, you know, we're producing, and we haven't even buffed yet, we're producing a real nice finish on here. That's why super sharp blades are very shiny, because they're just that smooth. And it's not the act of just getting it smooth. So some might say, well, why don't you just start at 2500? You'll be very smooth. Yet you won't. It'll take you forever to get a burr. You won't get a burr, especially if the blade is very dull. You'll go through sheets and sheets of 2500 grit to remove enough metal to get to a burr. So start at 240. That burr is as fine as frog's hair. So you can't cheat the system. You have to go through the 5 grits, start at 240, and this was a mostly new head. People ask, well, can I just start at 800? Sure you can, but you're going to spend a lot of time trying to get your first grit at 800 when you could have gotten there really fast if you started at 240. This is going to be a fantastic edge. I can tell that already. So let's check for a burr. So that popping is us catching on the burr, and that's why you want a narrow piece. A wide piece makes it really tough to detect the burr. Now we're going to break that burr off. And part of the burr breaking is actually bending it back to the bevel side. So for insurance sake, because you don't want to leave any of the burr behind, any burr left behind is going to feel dull, and you don't want that. And I've proven it on my sharpness meter. If I leave burr behind, I can feel it on the blade. I can find it on the microscope, test that area, and it tests more dull than the areas where the burr is gone. So do some insurance strokes. I've now moved the burr to this side. Let's get rid of it. Now that we've gotten rid of it on this side, let's go back. And this is really important at 2500 grit. Let's keep bending that burr back and forth until we've broken it off. It's like a paper clip. It's a piece of metal. You can only bend it so many times and it's going to snap off. When that burr is gone, that's when you're going to have a very sharp head. So let's do a little bit more insurance strokes here. Get the burr back to that side. If there's any burr left, we're going to break it off. Alright, so the next step will be buffing compound, but as you can see, like the bevel side, the flat side is becoming very smooth and very polished. So what we are going to do next is buffing. Alright, we're at the buffing stage. So here I just took a piece of printer paper, any kind of paper you want. I'm going to cover it with buffing compound. Green or white, both are good. Don't use reds or browns, they're a little bit too coarse. Certainly gray is emery cake, you wouldn't want to use that. We're just buffing. You can apply it right to the stick, it just makes it harder to tape things to it later. So now we've got some buffing compound on here. You're only going to use a pulling stroke. Do not use a pushing stroke. You will scrape the compound off of the paper. You'll just knife it right off. And it's very sharp now. And you would risk cutting right through the paper. So just use a pulling stroke. You can't overdo this. The more you do this, the more polished and smooth that cutting edge becomes. The more scalpel-like it will be. You'll notice there will be some buildup behind on the back side here. And just scrape that off. We haven't gone very far, but we're starting to get a really nice edge. Don't forget, now look at how dark this is getting. Don't forget to, again, do the backside. Lay it flat. Trap it. See here, you can, I'm pushing forward, I'm just cutting the buffing compound right off. Lay it flat. Backward stroke. Again, the attention that you're paying to the bevel side, you're going to pay to the flat side. Now both sides of the cutting edge, the topography when looking at that under a microscope, all of the hills and valleys that 240 created, that 400 reduced and 8 and 12 and 2500, all of those jaggedness edges, buffing compound is just going to smooth away, polish them off. Now let's go more back on this side. So I'm going to keep playing around with this. You can't overdo this step. You really need more scratch removal, edge refinement than anything. So I'll keep going with this, and then we will look at it under the microscope. We will look at it in the sharpness meter to see what we did, if we had any effect on it. I'm going to guess that we did. And the last step will be to throw it on the scale and show that 0 weight was taken off. Stay tuned. That edge looked pretty nice under the microscope. Again, we want to pay attention to the back side for burr breaking, not just the front side, but now the proof is in the pudding. Here, let's see what we get for a score. .84. That is a very sharp edge. That is a very lethal edge. I'll get the question about the tanto tip. You can sharpen the tanto tip freehand. You can leave it in here if you like. Let's get some focus again. And freehand the tanto tip. As you can see, the black oxide coating is still on the tanto tip. So they sharpen it, coat it, then they resharpen the single bevel, but this still has the black oxide coating on it. This is the bone breaker. This is not a slicer. Look at how small it is compared to my pinky nail, so you're not getting a lot of slicing here. But if you hit a rock or something, certainly freehand that back on there. But that is the new revised C guide with a 45-degree position, and that is how sharp we got this blade. Now the last step that everyone is always concerned about, how much weight was taken off. We started with 126 grains. This was a 125 grain head. Again, we only did one edge. That side we didn't touch. We just did this side. As expected, 0 weight is taken off. Even if you hit a rock and have to take a little nick out, this blade is so small, you aren't going to take much weight off of it. So don't worry about weight reduction as a result of sharpening.